Good evening, everybody. As we begin this meeting, I will ask everyone present to please silence your cell phones and any other electronic devices. And of course, I'll remind council that our procedure bylaw prescribes the use of electronics during council meetings. It is 6:31 p.m. I'll call this council planning meeting to order. And as we begin this meeting, I will formally recognize the traditional keepers of this land and specifically our neighbors of the Alderville First Nation with a formal territorial acknowledgement. We are meeting on the Gunshot Treaty lands of 1788. It is on these lands and on the shores of the big lake that we now call Lake Ontario that the Mississauga and Anishinaabe met with the Crown to facilitate the opening of these lands for settlement. Let us be reminded of the responsibility we all have in making sure that we respect these lands and waters in perpetuity, these lands and waters that give us life and sustain our livelihoods. Move to the approval of the agenda with a motion moved by Councillor Rowley, second by Deputy Mayor Anderson, that Council approve the December 8th, 2025 planning meeting agenda as presented. Is there any discussion? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. Members of Council, have any declarations of pecuniary interest? And if so, please state the general nature thereof. There are none noted. We have no delegations this evening, which brings us to our statutory public meeting. The Municipality of Brighton takes steps beyond the requirements of the Planning Act to engage the community in land use planning initiatives. The municipality also holds a statutory public meeting on the planning item and then receives a staff report with a recommendation on which council will make a decision. It is during this meeting that council depends on the community to provide input for our decision. This input may be received in advance of the statutory public meeting by sending correspondence to the clerk's office and or by making an oral submission to council at the statutory public meeting. This will best inform council on the land use planning matter prior to council making our final decision. The province's regulations now limit appeal rights to only the applicant and specified regulated persons. For details or information on the new appeal process, we got to stop calling it new, I think. Please visit the municipal website or contact the clerk's office. I have a motion moved by Councillor Butwell, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that council move into the statutory public meeting December 8th, 2025 at 6:33 p.m. Is there any discussion? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. First item in our statutory public meeting is a zoning bylaw amendment and consent application for file Z07-2025 and B05-2025 and B06-2025 being 1208 Richmond Street, the applicant Dingman. The purpose of the public meeting is to address requirements under the Planning Act for hosting a public meeting before making a decision to obtain public input towards making any decision on the proposed zoning bylaw amendment and consent applications. So, Ms. Bricknell, by what method and on what date was notice of the application given?
Through your worship, notice of the zoning bylaw amendment and consent application has been given in compliance with the requirements of the Planning Act. A public notice sign for the second statutory public meeting was posted on the property on November 7th, 2025. Notice of public meeting was also mailed to landowners within 120 meters of the subject lands and all agencies on November 7th, 2025. Previously, a public notice sign was posted on the property on September 22nd, and we had previously sent a public meeting notice to all landowners within 120 meters and all agencies also on September 22nd, 2025.
Thank you, Ms. Bricknell. And would you please explain the purpose and reason for the subject applications before council this evening?
Through your worship, the purpose of consent applications B05-2025 and B06-2025 is to sever a 1.39 hectare or 3.4 acre portion of the property located at 1208 Richmond Street and to also sever a 1.01 hectare, 2.5 acre portion from the same property under Section 53 of the Planning Act. The purpose of the zoning bylaw amendment Z07-2025 is to rezone the proposed new lots from the rural RU zone to the rural residential exception zone RR52 to ensure consistent zoning and address setback requirements as provided by Lower Trent Conservation Authority. The environmental protection lands located on the severed parcels require a 15-meter buffer. I will go on. Staff at Lower Trent Conservation Authority have confirmed the ability to place a driveway entrance on both of the proposed lots. The zoning bylaw map shows the buffer required to be maintained for the driveways. There's also a requirement for an additional culvert as a condition of consent at the applicant's cost, as supported by the conclusions of a hydrologic evaluation completed in September 2023 by GHD Limited. The site plan to date shows the location for a proposed southern lot driveway entrances as determined by regulatory policies. Technical information available at time of reporting demonstrates conformity with water course crossings policies. And to ensure compliance, we have added an additional schedule, Schedule B, that serves as an additional map to the zoning bylaw. It is Lower Trent Conservation Authority's mapping that has delineated the entrances and building envelope requirements. LTC has agreed to work with staff and the landowner for both the entrance and the prescribed building envelope. There's also a proposed development agreement to be entered into at a future time that would include lot grading and drainage, any additional culverts, reinforced silt fencing, and erosion controls. This agreement would also include further recommendations by GHD Limited as shown through their environmental impact study and hydrologic evaluation study.
Thank you, Ms. Britnell. Appreciate the information. Are there any persons present who have questions or comments regarding the proposed zoning bylaw amendment or consent applications? Are there any questions or comments regarding the proposed zoning bylaw amendment or consent applications from members of council? Councillor Wright.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I just noticed in going through this today that the EIS had initially recommended a 30-meter buffer, but this was cut in half to 15. Can someone tell me the rationale behind cutting that in half?
Ms. Britnell.
Through your worship, my best understanding is that there was ground truthing completed by Lower Trent Conservation, and that they felt that there was a suitable building envelope. Having been on the site and looking at the wetlands that occur there, and I do not feel that they would have provided what's the right word? Would be in support of these applications if they did not feel that the buffers were appropriate. There was 3 site visits made with the landowner.
Can I follow up?
Follow up.
Okay, so with the 15-meter buffer then, it was also noted that the measuring tools used were not as precise as those used by surveyors. And it was alluded to the idea that the southern driveway could potentially be inside that 15-meter buffer by as much as about 5 to 7 meters.
So that was one reason why this, through your worship, this is one reason why the application had been tabled temporarily back in September. I do not feel that that is the case any longer. We did provide a Schedule B map that demonstrates in the zoning bylaw where the limitations for that 15-meter setback should exist. Again, I feel very strongly that Lower Trent supports this application and that they feel that their water body crossings policies are being abided by, and that through silt fencing, through looking at, again, there's no lake trout present in this wetland, those kinds of things, that does, in my opinion, support the conclusions to support the lower severance. We have gone back quite a few times back and forth.
Okay, just concerned that if a survey is done and then that line moves, like what happens then if the permit can't be issued at that point?
So when the application was brought forth in September, we had a frontage for that southern lot of 104 meters, and it has now been extended to 109 meters. So we did create an additional 5-meter buffer for that reason. To answer your question more directly, Lower Trent would not issue a permit, and therefore Brighton would not be able to issue an entrance permit, and therefore the severance could not move forward with a building permit application.
Thank you both. Are there any other questions from members of council? Ms. Britnell, do you have any final comments?
Through your worship, not at this time.
Thank you for that. Does council wish to make a decision this evening? Motion reads, the motion is moved by Councilor Rowley, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson, that council receive the staff report dated December 8th, 2025 regarding the subject applications for 1208 Richmond Street being consent applications B05 2025 and B06 2025 and zoning bylaw amendment application file Z07 2025. And that council gives provisional consent to applications B05 2025 and B06 2025 in accordance with the conditions of consent provided in this report. And further, that council enacts a zoning bylaw as found on this agenda to rezone the severed portion of the lands from rural zone with flood prone area zone overlay to rural residential zone. Is there any discussion? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. Next item in our statutory public meeting is with regard to consent application file numbers B09 2025 and B10 2025. The subject lands are 15047 County Road 2 and 15033 County Road 2. The applicants are Richard McNeill and Deborah Hackett. The purpose of the public meeting is to address requirements under the Planning Act for hosting a public meeting before council makes a decision and to obtain public input towards making a decision on the proposed consent application. So, Ms. Bricknell, by what method and on what date was notice of the applications given?
Through your worship, notice of the consent applications have been given in compliance with requirements of the Planning Act. A public notice sign for this statutory public meeting was posted on the property on November 14th, 2025. Notice of the public meeting was also mailed to landowners within 120 meters of the subject lands and all agencies on November 14th, 2025.
Thank you, Ms. Bricknell. And would you please explain the purpose and reason for the subject applications before council this evening?
Through your worship, the purpose of consent application B09 2025 is to sever 0.034 hectares, 0.84 hectare portion of the property located at 15033 County Road 2 and add it to the adjacent property located at 1507 County Road 2. An existing row of trees, a sculpture, and a propane tank currently on 15033 County Road 2 would be added to 1507 County Road 2. The purpose of this lot line adjustment is to simplify the lot configuration. The purpose of consent application B10 2025 is a lot line adjustment to the western side lot to sever 0.34 hectares or 0.84 acres and is a land swap with 15033 County Road 2. The combined applications will result in no net change to the lot areas of these two parcels.
Thank you, Ms. Bricknell. Are there persons present who have questions or comments regarding the proposed consent applications? There are none noted. Are there any questions or comments regarding the consent applications for members of council? There are none noted. Any final comments, Ms. Bricknell?
Through your worship, not at this time.
Thank you. Council wish to make a decision this evening? I have a motion moved by Councilor Wheeldon, seconded by Councilor McCausland, that council receive the staff report dated December 8th, 2025 regarding the subject applications for 15047 County Road 2 and 15033 County Road 2 being consent applications B09 2025 and B10 2025, and the council gives provisional consent to applications B09 2025 and B10 2025 in accordance with the conditions of consent provided in this report. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. Next item in our statutory public meeting are consent application file numbers B07 2025 and B08 2025. The subject lands are 59 Bryce Drive. The applicants are Troy O'Neill and Aaron O'Neill. The purpose of the public meeting is to address requirements under the Planning Act for hosting a public meeting before council makes a decision and to obtain public input towards making any decision on the proposed consent applications. Ms. Bricknell, by what method and on what date was notice of the applications given?
Through your worship, notice of the consent applications was given in compliance with requirements of the Planning Act. A public notice sign for the statutory public meeting was posted on the property on November 14th, 2025. Notice of public meeting was also mailed to landowners within 120 meters of the subject lands and all agencies on November 14th, 2025.
Thank you, Ms. Britnell. And would you please explain the purpose and reason for the subject applications before council this evening?
Through your worship, the purpose of consent application B07 2025 is a lot addition of an existing parcel that was formed through road closure 01 2025 that allows the proponent to add 0.145 hectare or 0.36 acres as purchased through the municipality earlier this year to an existing parcel. The second consent application B08 2025 is proposed to sever off an existing dwelling located on an existing parcel of 0.35 hectare or 0.87 acres. The retained lot is intended to be a building lot, and the vacant lands to the north have an area of 5.34 hectares or 13.19 acres. The development standards of this hamlet residential zone requires 45 meters of frontage as per the comprehensive zoning bylaw of the Municipality of Brighton, 140/2002. Therefore, we are looking for a site-specific zone that would permit proposed frontage of 12.12 meters in the hamlet residential zone. Staff are asking to return to Planning Council with a new zoning bylaw amendment application as a condition of these two proposed consents, applications B07 2025 and B08 2025.
Thank you, Ms. Britnell. Are there persons present who have questions or comments regarding the proposed consent applications? There are none noted. Are there any questions or comments from members of council? None noted. Ms. Britnell, any final comments?
Through your worship, not at this time.
And does council wish to make a decision this evening? I have a motion moved by Councillor McCausland, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that council receive the staff report dated December 8th, 2025, regarding the subject applications for 59 Bryce Drive, being consent applications B07 2025 and B08 2025, and that council gives provisional consent to applications B07 2025 and B08 2025 in accordance with the conditions of consent provided in this report. Is there any discussion? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. Next item in our statutory public meeting is with regard to an amendment to the official plan, file OPA 02-2022, zoning bylaw amendment, file Z10 2022 and Z05 2025, draft plan of subdivision approval, file sub 01 2025. The subject lands are 214 Ontario Street. The applicant is Tomba Enterprises, Inc. The purpose of the public meeting is to address requirements under the Planning Act for hosting a public meeting before council makes a decision and to obtain public input towards making any decision on the proposed official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, and draft plan of subdivision applications. Mr. Warren, by what method and on what date was notice of the applications given?
Through your worship, the notice of zoning bylaw amendment was provided in compliance with the requirements of the Planning Act. Basically, the public notice sign was posted on the property on November the 17th, 2025. Additionally, notice of public meeting was mailed to landowners within 120 meters of the subject lands and all agencies on that same date, November the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. Would you please explain the purpose and reason for the subject applications before council this evening?
Yes, thank you, your worship. Through you, the purpose and the effect of the public meetings and the applications is really to advise council and the public regarding the applications for amending the official plan, zoning bylaw, and a draft plan of subdivision in accordance with the Planning Act. The meeting introduces the proposal and provides the public with an opportunity to identify issues and concerns and to express views in support of or in opposition to the proposed development. The information received at this meeting will be compiled into a subsequent report, which will be brought forward to council at a future date for consideration. Specifically, the official plan amendment is looking to change the current designation from a highway commercial and greenfield designation to a newly created special policy area designation, which would permit the proposed development of 81 residential townhomes and live-work units, plus 14 additional accessory units. The zoning bylaw application would be to rezone the subject lands to a new site-specific, again, urban residential 4 zone with a number of custom zoning provisions detailed in the report related to building setbacks and other site-specific provisions. The draft plan of subdivision would look at how do we get 81 townhouses on 11 blocks? There's an internal park block. The townhouses are proposed to be 2 and 3 stories in height, pardon me, include an attached garage and with access to a private condominium road. The subject lands will basically be accessed from a public road along the southerly flank and will run westerly off of Ontario Street.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. Are there persons present who have questions or comments regarding the application this evening? Sir. One moment, Wesley.
Yes, sir. My name is
Could you give me your last name again?
Peddle.
Peddle? Thank you.
I live at 313 Raglan Street. And I'm just concerned about the elevation that's going to be in this development. Because in the spring of the year, that's totally flooded back there. And is that going to be the final plan?
We're here to hear your comments and not make, I don't think the intent tonight is to make a decision. The motion that we'll hear after we've heard all the comments is that we receive the comments, and staff will then take them back and come forward with a report for council's consideration at a future date. So it's important that we do hear these comments about flooding in the back so that we can make sure that
That is my main concern, is the flooding back there and what elevation that's going to be going through. Because I'm on the lower end of it.
yeah, I will point out that at some point tonight, I think we're going to hear from the applicant's planning consultant as well. So they may have answers to some of these questions. So I'm watching you nod your head, sir. I'm going to let the people in the gallery speak, or people online speak first, and then we'll hear your comments afterwards. See if you can address some of these questions as well.
And another concern is if they go ahead with this plan or whatever, like the 3-story buildings, would they be up in the front or in the back? Okay.
Yep, thank you. I see the planning consultant making some notes, so thank you. We'll hear what they have to say. Anyone else with questions or comments, sir?
Hi, my name is Viorel, family name Sandor. I live on 311 Raglan Street. We recently moved over there in last year.
And sir, could you please make sure you sign in on the form there so that we have that for the record?
So I already sent a quite significant email to Ms. Candice in November. I stated my concerns over there in written. Basically, like my neighbor, we are concerned about having 81 townhouses bunched in 11 buildings behind our backyards. So how much is going to be their backyard, because it's a bit of privacy breach. Like, I'm thinking, that if you have a 3-story high townhouse, basically your privacy is none. I mean, it's close to zero. You're limited. Basically, they can see everything into your house. And another question, when the construction is going to start, how long this development building is going to take effect? Like 3 years, 4 years? Like we see in Brighton, which is great, a lot of developments take place, but they start and they never end. So that's not my business. It's just, that's my opinion. And if we start something, let's finish it up, then do something else afterwards. So that's pretty much all.
Thank you, sir. And we'll see if the planning consultant's able to answer some of your questions as well. Anyone else who wishes to make a comment or have a question with regard to this application, these applications, pardon me? We have the representative for the developer.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council, and the public. My name is Paul Demchek with Pecuniary Planning and Management. I am the land use planner on behalf of the landowner. Just for everyone's benefit, I have prepared a brief presentation for this night's meeting, so I would ask if staff could please share that.
We'll just get you to use your microphone. You just push the silver button there. There you go.
Can you hear me now? Okay, great. I've noted just here on this slide, municipal address obviously is 214 Ontario Street in Brighton. If I could take you to just the next, I think it's slide 3. And just briefly, I've noted that obviously I'm here as the land use planning consultant on behalf of the owner. The owner is Tomba Enterprise, who is a residential land developer in the province of Ontario. I've worked with specifically myself, Tomba Enterprise, on numerous townhouse developments across the province. Obviously, this is our first project here in Brighton. I'll provide a bit of history, but first I'll start with some of the site and area context. So you can see here, on this image, the property is located just southwest of Ontario Street and Raglan Street at 214 Ontario Street. It's 2.31 hectares, or just over 5.5 acres in terms of its size. The site was previously operating as a greenhouse and garden center, and the western half has historically been vacant, with a number of the trees that were obviously previously planted there associated with the previous use. I'll note that the entirety of the site is currently vacant, as that greenhouse was demolished a number of years ago. Just briefly, I'll note that obviously north of the property is Raglan Street and some existing single detached houses. And to the south and west are greenfield and vacant lands, similar to the rear of the subject site. And then obviously to the east is Ontario Street, which includes typology of residential townhouses, semi-detached, and single detached houses as well. Next slide, please. So just to start with maybe some of the planning context, and I'll work my way top down as we do in many of these Planning Act applications. So in terms of the County of Northumberland official plan, the subject site is within the designated urban area within the county official plan. This county official plan and the associated growth management strategy provides for policy direction. It also establishes minimum growth and density targets for the county, as well as for individual municipalities. Specifically under section B10 of the County of Northumberland official plan, the county's minimum designated greenfield area density target is 30 residents and jobs per hectare, which is combined for the urban areas in the county. And I'll note that the policies within this official plan provide that the direction and growth of development will occur within urban areas such as the subject site. And these policies also promote development of existing areas on vacant or unutilized lands, and specifically along roads with adequate services. If I could take you to the next slide, please. In terms of the Municipality of Brighton official plan, the subject lands are duly designated as both greenfield, which is obviously green on the far western portion of the lands. Sorry, and as well as highway commercial, which as you can see in purple on the screen here. The urban settlement area of Brighton have three categories for future residential development, being low, medium, and high density categories. Specifically, the proposed development for the subject lands obviously is proposing a medium density category. That includes obviously multi-unit forms of development, and it's intended to have a density of 30 units per hectare up to a density of 60 units per hectare. Townhouse development on the subject property is consistent with the Municipality of Brighton's medium density policies and encourage a blend of housing types in new development. There's also a number of policies and criteria related to transportation in terms of obviously where these typologies of proposals are intended to be proposed within the municipality. And obviously, there's an intent from a consistency perspective to encourage that development within greenfield areas occurs within an urban area, consistent with the policies of the county official plan, which is obviously being provided in this instance. If I could take you to the next slide, please. The applications, which I'll speak to in more detail in a moment, predated some of the work that the municipality is currently doing as part of the Southwest Secondary Plan area. But obviously, for the purposes of both just this meeting and just for the benefit of the public, this area in Brighton is, like I've just mentioned, just from a structural perspective, it's intended to be developed for future urban areas within the municipality and the county. And the municipality is currently undergoing the initial stages of the Southwest Secondary Plan area. You can see from this slide, these are some of the preliminary land use concepts that have come out of that secondary plan area. The highway commercial designation still exists at the frontage of the site, and you can see at the rear of the site, it's intended for both future residential land use designation, and then there's a recreational and tourist overlay that applies to the rear portion of the property. This obviously cascades to some of the adjacent lands, specifically to the south and portions of the property to the west. Obviously, I'm honing in on this slide and this image just to obviously focus on the land specifically at the southwest quadrant, I'll call it, at Raglan and Ontario Street. But I will note that the majority of lands obviously further to the west are obviously as part of the environmental protection area that you can see in green on the left-hand slide of this image. Next slide, please. And then just briefly, just in terms of the zoning, under the Brighton zoning bylaw 140-2002. The subject zoning for the site is currently agricultural or A2 zone, which obviously limits the current permitted uses on the property. And as such, a zoning amendment is required to obviously comply with those upper tier policy documents that I just previously mentioned. As was noted by Mr. Warren previously, the site-specific zoning for the property would permit an R4 zoning designation, which would allow for a townhouse typology with site-specific criteria that allows for obviously the performance standards for what we are proposing this evening. Next slide, please. So this is the draft plan of subdivision for the proposed development. It was noted that the landowner does seek to develop the lands with residential uses through this draft plan of subdivision. And there's obviously the associated zoning bylaw amendment and official plan amendment applications that are before council this evening. There's a total of 81 freehold townhouses that are proposed, or over 11 residential blocks. And as noted on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see there's block 14, which is an open space or parkland block that's intended for private amenity area or community amenity area, sorry, for each of the townhomes. Street A, which is on the bottom of the draft plan here on the screen, that's an intended shared road between the subject property and the adjacent property to the south, while the balance of the roads are obviously proposed as internal condominium roads. And as I mentioned, each of the townhomes will be freehold townhomes located on a common element condominium road. If I could take you to the next slide, please. And I will speak a little bit more to that road in a moment. Each of the townhouse units are 2 and 3 stories in height and have floor areas that generally range between 1,800 square feet to 2,300 square feet in area. Each dwelling will include 2 vehicular parking spaces, one of which will be within an internal garage for each of the respective townhomes. Just in terms of a brief history, this application has been a number of years in the making. I'll note that a pre-consultation meeting was originally held in November of 2020. And then initial public consultations for this development took place in 2021, being November 10th and December 7th. The formal applications for the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment were submitted in July of 2022. And since that time, my client, as well as the consulting team, has obviously worked with staff to make a number of modifications to the proposed development. Some of these include engineering modifications and design considerations. The big change, obviously, was the proposed public road, which is obviously located, as I mentioned, on the southern portion of the property. And there was also a slight reduction in the total number of units that are being proposed as well this evening. I'll note that that public road that's located on the south, it's consistent with some of the draft concepts that have been provided for associated with the Brighton Southwest Secondary Plan. It also aligns with the intent of the feedback that we received from township planning, engineering, and transportation staff for a public road to be appropriately provided adjacent to Ontario Street and at the southern limit specifically of the property. If I could take you to the Actually, sorry, my apologies. If we could just linger on this. I did hear one comment just as it relates to those typologies in the 2 and 3 story townhomes. I'll note that all of the townhomes that are located on the north side or the top image of the screen that back onto all the properties on Raglan, those will all be 2-story townhomes in height, while all the height of the townhomes internal to the development or south of those northern blocks will be the 3-story townhomes in height. And I'll show those in some of the next slides. Next slide, please. Thank you. So these are the 3-story townhome typologies that are, again, located internal to the site. And if I could take you down one more slide. Here's the 2-story townhouse typology. And then finally, if I could take you to one more slide down. So these are just the elevations of specifically the 7 live-work units. These 7 units are located on the block that's adjacent to Ontario Street. There's a dual intent of, obviously, there's that highway commercial land use designation that I showed you that abutted the frontage of the site on Ontario Street. Obviously, there's an intent to try to assist in animating Ontario Street within this segment and as part of this new Southwest Brighton secondary plan area. And then also, obviously, to provide for both commercial uses that could integrate within the residential townhouse blocks for the property. Next slide, please. So just a brief summary. So there's a total of 81 townhouse units over those 11 residential townhouse blocks. That includes the 7 live-work units. A total of 201 parking spaces are provided within the development. This includes the 2 spaces per unit for the townhomes, as well as a total of 39 residential visitor parking spaces, which includes 3 accessible spaces within the development. There's a obviously programmed outdoor community amenity space that's proposed. Sidewalks are provided throughout. And obviously there's a high quality architectural design and materials that are being provided. You can see there's obviously a brick and siding typology in terms of the materials being used. And obviously there's significant landscape and amenity space program that's intended. This includes private amenity space, obviously, for each residential townhome. I'll note that as part of the setbacks specifically for those northern blocks, there was a comment about concern about spatial separation distances and privacy. Each of those townhomes will have a minimum of 7.5 meters of rear yard private amenity space setbacks for all those northern townhouse blocks, and it's a little bit further for some of the eastern blocks on the northeast corner of the site. Next slide, please. So just briefly, just in terms of next steps, this includes my presentation at this time. I do want to just obviously thank everyone for the opportunity to present the subject application, and we do look forward to comments both from council and the public this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Is it Mr. Demchuk?
Yes,
Am I
that's
saying your name right? Thank you.
close enough. Yeah.
How do you say it?
Demcheck.
Demchuk, thank you.
Yes. Yeah.
Not close enough. We say people's names right when we can. Perhaps I would get you to address the concern about water on the property and what the intent would be from an engineering perspective to make sure that that water didn't flow elsewhere.
Absolutely. As part of some of the redesign work and the back and forth, significant back and forth we've had with the municipality as well as the third-party consultants on behalf of the municipality, what we are looking at doing are a number of components. So the first one being, where applicable, there will be obviously retaining walls to ensure that there's no stormwater management flows onto any adjacent properties that would negatively impact or make stormwater management a worse condition than obviously what it currently exists. Where possible, we're also looking at improving existing swale conditions to take stormwater flows to where obviously they need to go. And in some cases, obviously, we are looking at doing retaining walls to raise portions of the site to appropriately drain stormwater flows, whether it's to Ontario Street or in some cases to swales that we are proposing at the back of the property.
Thank you, sir. And there was a question about how long we would anticipate the, shovels in the ground to sell out be. I know that's impossible. Your market crystal ball is probably as broken as mine is. So what would the want from Tomba be from a build through perspective?
I will say that the market conditions are obviously extremely challenging at the best of times these days. But I will say that obviously, assuming that obviously there's a draft plan approval that's being completed, it would be the intent within 3 years to start construction.
I think the bigger concern is how long will you take to finish construction once you start?
Oh, I see. I would suggest that assuming that depending on absorption for the units, this could be a 2 to 3 year cycle to build out this development.
Thank you for that. Any other questions from council before I let the proponent go? Go ahead, Councillor Wright.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Hi. I've had the great fortune of living in Milton where I've seen several of these work-live situations built out and used. And one of my biggest complaints in trying to access some of those businesses was lack of parking. I mean, these aren't huge units, so I'm not sure that there would be massive amounts of retail or services in any of them, but I could see 2 spaces per unit becoming problematic, especially on Ontario Street that's already super busy. If there's any way for more parking to be found for that, I would highly suggest it because it can be very problematic. I know you've got some visitor parking, but even 32 visitor sites for 81 homes in total seems very small when you consider what happens around holiday times.
Any comment?
Through you, Your Worship, thank you very much for the comment. I can appreciate that. I've actually worked on a number of those live work units, both within Milton and Oakville, specifically. They can be problematic depending on how you're dealing with parking and not only like the number of parking, but the location and how you design it. I will say, obviously, in this context, you can't always, you do your best, but you can't always plan for those worst case scenarios. Everyone shows up, for example, at Christmas Day to do shopping, etc. Within certain commercial developments, things get busy. Notwithstanding that, what we've done in this proposal, if I could just briefly take staff back to the site plan slide. I can't remember what slide it's on, a few more up. There we go. Thank you. So you can see here, we've located the visitor parking in 2 locations for the proposed development. The first I'll note is right behind the live work units on the west side of the first condominium road that goes north-south. So there's a number of those visitor parking spots, to be candid, that are intended specifically for those live work and commercial units. And then obviously the balance of the visitor parking spaces on the far west side adjacent to the outdoor community amenity area. I will note that we've also submitted a traffic study, obviously in support of the development. It's a comment that I'll just take back to obviously my client and to the transportation consultant, and we will look at that.
Thank you.
Councillor Wheeldon.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. This is going to be one of the, or this would be one of the most dense neighborhoods in Brighton thus far. Hopefully growing up and rather than out moving forward. But I sit on the board of Quinte Transit, and I'm always looking for higher density developments to have a bus stop. Do you have plans for one here?
It's a great question. That has not been specifically outlined within like our draft plan at this point in time. I think if there's a need for bus transit, I think an appropriate like condition for the draft plan approval in theory and the design for it could occur within the frontage of the site, specifically near the corner where the new public road could be. I can't see, we have plenty of space there to accommodate that if it's the desire of the municipality.
Just so you know, the buses in Brighton aren't big
Understood. Understood.
yet. Hopefully not for a long time. Any other questions from members of council for the proponent? Go ahead, Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of questions. I guess going back to the elevation issues and the sometimes concerns that we have in that south part of Brighton as far as installing proper municipal services when the land is lying so low. Can you address that?
Yes. I'm not an engineer, so I'll do my best. There is obviously a high water table within this area of Brighton that came out very clear as part of our hydrogeological and geotechnical studies. We looked at both a number of options in terms of trying to raise the site, potential gravity fed systems, or whether we have to install pumping stations, obviously at the cost of the developer for doing that. I know we're still working through a number of those conditions, and we will continue to do that with engineering staff on behalf of the township. But there's obviously ways to deal with it appropriately. At the end of the day, whatever system we decide to proceed with, it will be to the satisfaction of the town's engineers to ensure we meet their standards.
On that, but I have a couple of other
Sure, go
questions,
ahead.
if that's okay. You spoke of 30 units per hectare. That's the minimum?
Yes.
Okay, because you're looking at 80 plus when we only have 2.5 hectares. So we're kind of a little bit more than the low end of the medium density requirements, correct?
Through you, your worship, absolutely. This is still within the medium density range, but obviously we're trying to do two things. We're trying to meet the number one, the minimum density targets, but Brighton, like all municipalities, frankly, across the province are being encouraged to obviously meet some of the growth targets by the province, the county in this instance. And obviously we're seeing, as I was mentioned by Councillor Wheeldon earlier, this is one of the most dense developments that the municipality has seen. And I don't like always being the first, but objectively, I think there's going to be more developments like this where you see additional opportunities for intensification within greenfield areas that are of more dense typologies. We actually did, I will just be candid for everyone's benefit, we had met with the municipality originally and showed them a plan of just single detached houses. That doesn't even meet the minimum density requirements by the county if we were to do that. And so obviously there's a need for the municipality to look at different typologies of housing, and my client's obviously seeking a townhouse typology in this instance.
Question regarding stormwater management.
Yes.
You seem to have kind of gotten a grasp of that, but 81 units will, and working with our staff, would there be a stormwater pond required for that area? Or are we just going to try to mitigate all of this with swale?
Again, I'm not, sorry, through your worship, I'm not the engineer, obviously associated with the development. In this instance, we're obviously looking at developing the site without the need for a stormwater pond. I can't speak whether or not there will be additional overland flow, because obviously there's a wetland feature further to the southwest of the subject site. And there's obviously an opportunity for some of the existing drainage patterns to occur for the benefit of time. However, that subdivision, whether it's ours or the adjacent one, whenever that comes to fruition, is developed. I don't know if whether or not they will have a stormwater pond specifically on their site or not, but obviously for our site, we are looking to develop without a storm pond.
Go ahead.
This one has to do with emergency services. As we just have one entrance into this development. Do do we not have that requirement with the municipality that you need an in and out?
It does go around. The
So that's good enough. That's good enough.
I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Warren or Director Walsh, but I do know that the fire chief sits on the development team when they go through these drawings and so on. So Director, do you want to comment, please?
Thank you.
Through the mayor to council. Yeah, that's a good question. And it's something we look for. The magic number is around 100. Yeah, and then below that number. Plus, we anticipate that the abutting landowner will be looking at their own subdivision application at some point. We're often seeing different drafts from that person. So I think there's an interest in going forward with something there. So that would involve some shared egress through to Raglan.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Appreciate your time.
Thank you. If there, just briefly, if there are any other additional comments or questions from the public and I'm asked to provide a response, I'm more than happy to. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'm sure staff will be in touch. Are there any questions or comments regarding the subject application for staff from members of council? Director Walsh.
I don't want to be remiss in not mentioning that we did receive some late correspondence to the file, and it's from the firm Templeman, specifically Jennifer Savini, the lawyer, and she's written on behalf of Mr. Paul Wayne and Christy Wayne, our budding owners to the south. And in summary, the comment is that the fundamental land ownership servicing stormwater management issues remain unresolved, i.e. there have been ongoing discussions, which make draft approval of the proposed development premature until these matters are addressed. And then the letter goes on to talk about stormwater management, specifically the volume of water proposed to be discharged into the Ontario Street ditch. There was a memo about the ditch analysis, and there was about 0.3 meter maximum depth flow in the ditch, and the ditch was determined or demonstrated to have sufficient capacity for that. In terms of the land ownership, this has been a long-term back and forth discussion. Staff did provide a memorandum of agreement on shared infrastructure between the two landowners. We haven't had a response to that. And we've heard the time frame that this has been in circulation with the municipality and among the parties, and staff have put a lot of hours, a lot of effort, a lot of focus in facilitating some kind of cost sharing arrangement, and still hopeful. But I think we've come to the point now where we've need to move from facilitative effort and move to conclusiveness on this question. But I'm hopeful because now we see Ms. Savini's letter here, and I think that things may proceed expeditiously from this point. I'm hopeful. At this point, I can only say that this staff person is comfortable in considering as a draft condition a shared development agreement for cost sharing of shared infrastructure. I might also comment, this is not uncommon. This is pretty common in areas where there is a secondary plan laid down and common roads are articulated and common stormwater management ponds are articulated. So this is nothing new. It's just that the municipality needs to really provide a leadership role on that, because at the end of the day, we really do want to minimize new public roads onto Ontario Street. It is an arterial road, so it by its functional classification calls for minimization of intersections. And secondly, we want to minimize our stormwater management facilities because we assume those and have a responsibility to maintain them. So we want to minimize our infrastructure that we're maintaining over the long term. And so, you know, some municipalities have, some regions in the GTA have full-time staff just facilitating these types of agreements. But I think, and I'm hopeful that we will move towards an agreement, particularly when it's cost sharing. Everyone kind of wins at the end of the day. So we've had some good discussions recently. I'm hopeful.
Thank you, Director Walsh, and we're not the GTA and you're not getting any more staff. That's what you were pitching. Questions or comments from members of council? Go ahead, Councillor Wright.
I was just hoping that someone could maybe comment on what our rights are as property owners. We've seen it several times with developments and the people who are impacted by development, the noise of it, the maybe loss of privacy, the loss of their view. I think it's really important to remind everybody that we don't have the right to our view. If you have a view, enjoy it while you have it. We can't do one project at a time. That's not the way development and growth works. If you think Brighton was crazy, you should have seen Milton. Milton now looks like Mississauga. I'm looking at the letter, the public comments on attachment 9, and I totally get it. I've seen the development that happened in the GTA, and if you came from Brampton, I'm not sure if you, yeah, I know exactly where you are. But we're growing. We have to grow. We're mandated to grow. We've got people that we need to house. And unfortunately, that's going to mean our views are interrupted and our daily lives are going to be disrupted to some degree with dust and dirt and the sounds of building and all of that. But at some point, you do get past it. It is just the course of action of development. And I guarantee you that when the dust settles from all of this, you will still find Brighton a much more peaceful space to live in than Brampton. I can guarantee that. It's, well, yeah, we'll avoid those if at all possible, please. But there's this misperception that we have these rights to our views and our space and our privacy, but really you only have the right to what's on your property, just the same as the developer has the rights to what's on their property, right? So I think those are important points to make before we all get very stressed and upset about what we're seeing coming down the pipe. We have to grow.
Their problem, I'm still on the whole end of.
Nothing can happen in building a property without everything properly in place to mitigate those issues.
Sir, I'm not
Yeah.
going to get you to enter into a debate with members of council. If you're welcome to send correspondence to us. But I can't engage in that level of debate. Sorry. Go ahead, Councillor Wheeldon.
Just to add to what Councillor Wright was saying, I really appreciated your words, Councillor Wright. Councillor Wright and I both sit on Lower Trent Conservation Authority's board, and so we get to see the way that the Conservation Authority manages specifically water, and ensuring that people aren't allowed to build in places where we can reasonably foresee that will flood. You may have noticed the development happening on Cedar Street, north end of Cedar Street. How many 100,000 cubic meters of soil are coming in there? It all has to be done in order to ensure that homes don't flood. And so we're not in the business of allowing people to build homes that are going to flood, and we're not in the business of allowing people to build homes that are going to flood out their neighbors either. There are very strict regulations on all of those things, so much so that the province keeps trying to make us do it faster and simpler. But I do have tremendous faith in our planning staff here and the Conservation Authority staff as well. They're experts in their field, they're professionals, and they could probably be making more money elsewhere. So very grateful to have them and their expertise, and I do trust them, but at the same time, that's why we're here, is to make sure that all of the steps are followed. So we are here, and that's why we're hearing from you as well. So thank you, everyone who came. Really appreciate seeing you here. And if ever you have more questions, you're always welcome to reach out to any of us.
Or all of us. Thank you for that, Councillor Wheelan. Yeah, and the developer may not adversely affect any neighboring properties. And if for any reason that happens through water or soils or what have you, we have staff who tend to work closely with developers to make sure that it doesn't happen and that they mitigate that responsibility entirely. So no additional water from that land should be on your property as a result of development that happens today. That's the deal. Anything further from members of council? You're biting your tongue? You're good? Mr. Warren, any final comments?
Thank you, Your Worship. Director Walsh has mentioned the letter from Temple and Benenga from the abutting landowners to the south. So with that, I have no further comment.
Thank you, everybody, for your comments this evening. It was enlightening from both the public and the developer and our staff. I have a motion moved by Councillor Butwell, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that the report for the Planning and Development Department dated December 8th, 2025 regarding proposed official plan amendment application OPA 02-2022, zoning bylaw amendment application Z10 2022 and Z05 2025, and plan of condominium subdivision application sub 01 2025 be received, and that after receiving comments from the public, commenting agencies, peer reviewers, and municipal staff, that a staff report is brought back for council's consideration regarding proposed residential condominium development located at 214 Ontario Street. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one, I believe the planner said that this is probably still a 3-year out project. But do you know maybe when we might hear again from our staff? Will that be kind of maybe early spring or midsummer, or you have no idea?
Mr. Warren?
Through the chair, at this point, it would be difficult to say that the application has actually been in with the municipality for 5 years already.
Yeah.
So there are definitely some fine tuning to do.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think there's some work to be done with regard to the neighboring landowner as well, and some agreements there. So that can all take time through the lawyers. So we won't rush it, but we look forward to seeing something. Thank you. All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. Final item in our statutory public meeting is with regard to amendment to draft approval file sub 2021-02, zoning bylaw amendment file number Z08 2025. Subject lands are Applewood Meadows Phase 4, Rundle Lane. The applicant is Carusha Holdings Incorporated. The purpose of the public meeting is to address requirements under the Planning Act for hosting a public meeting before council makes a decision, and to obtain public input towards making any decision on the proposed zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of subdivision applications. Mr. Warren, by what method and on what date was notice of the applications given?
Through your worship, the zoning bylaw amendment application and draft plan of subdivision application were provided in compliance with the statutory notice requirements. Under the Planning Act, the public notice sign was placed on the property on November the 17th earlier this year, and the notice of public meeting was mailed to all landowners within 120 meters of the subject lands on the 14th of November earlier this year.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. And would you please explain the purpose and reason for the subject applications before council this evening?
Thank you. Through your worship, the purpose of both applications is to permit changes to a draft approved plan of subdivision and zoning for the 4th phase of the Applewood Meadows subdivision. The changes are primarily centered around proposed alteration in the built form of residential units offered within this 4th phase, while reducing the number of residential units in this phase from 308 to 182 dwellings, as well as the relocation and increase in size of the parkland block to increase opportunities for programmable parkland in the neighborhood. This reflects an ongoing discussion which has been taking place for several months with staff, and we continue to work with the applicant regarding the parkland block.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. Are there persons present who have questions or comments regarding the subject applications? And I note that the proponent's consultant, Holly Newitt with Foten, is here for a presentation. I think I'll do the same thing as with the other in case there are answers to those questions should they come up. So are there any persons present who have questions or comments regarding the subject application? Ms. Newitt, over to you.
Just wait for the presentation.
Thank you. And through you, your worship, my name is Holly Newitt, and I'm a registered professional planner with Foten Planning and Design. I'm here this evening to present an application for zoning bylaw amendment and amendment to draft plan of subdivision for a portion of the lands in Applewood Meadows Phase 4. Next slide, please. The lands are located on the west side of Brighton and form part of the existing Applewood Meadows and Orchard Gate subdivisions. The property is located on the periphery of the urban boundary, meaning that the surrounding uses to the west are predominantly rural and agricultural, and the uses to the east are predominantly residential in a suburban urban built form. Next slide, please. The lands are located on the south side of Main Street and north of the CN rail corridor. I'll note only a portion of the Phase 4 lands are subject to change through this proposal, and I'll speak in greater detail as to which lands later in the presentation. Next slide, please. The Phase 4 lands were subject to previous approvals in 2022, consisting of an official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, and draft plan of subdivision. The approved OPA redesignated the lands as residential within the Special Development Area number 17. The Special Development Area includes policies relating to the provision of rental units and secondary suites, transit supportive densities, and the potential for red line revisions to draft approved plans to be exempt from further public notification. The approved zoning bylaw amendment established 7 zones across the site, including 3 site-specific residential zones and a site-specific local commercial zone. The draft plan of subdivision established draft-approved lots, streets, and blocks per conceptual land use plan, seen on the right here. Next slide, please. The current applications for amendment to the draft plan of subdivision and zoning bylaw amendment seek to make red line revisions as part of the draft plan based on an updated conceptual land use plan while permitting greater flexibility for housing typologies across the site. The plan to the right of the screen, as well as the unit statistics table, are conceptual to show one possible configuration for the higher density blocks to the north and south of the applications area. I'll speak to the difference between a conceptual land use plan and a draft plan in the next few slides. The zoning bylaw amendment seeks to simplify zoning across the site, establishing 2 site-specific residential zones, which would serve to increase the mix of housing permitted on the site. The draft plan amendments would alter the established lot layouts through the middle of the development to reflect the needs of the housing market at this time. The mixed-use block to the north along Main Street and the stormwater management block to the south along the rail corridor are not proposed to change through this application. So they are the blocks that were previously approved that are not seeking amendment through this application. Next slide, please. As noted by Mr. Warren, the proposed amendment to the draft plan of subdivision will also serve to relocate and enlarge the dedicated park block within this phase of the subdivision. After extensive discussions between the applicant and municipal staff, it was collectively agreed that a large southern park block would allow for better programming opportunities and create through linkages with existing open space amenities to the east of the site. The park will therefore increase in size from approximately 1,500 square meters to just shy of 7,800 square meters, and this far exceeds the minimum 5% parkland dedication for the development. Next slide, please. This slide shows a comparison between the approved draft plan of subdivision on the left and the proposed amended draft plan on the right. We've discussed the park, which is shown in green. The middle section represents the most change through the applications, with the introduction of semi-detached dwellings and an increase in single detached dwellings shown in the lighter colors of yellow. Row house dwellings are still proposed adjacent to Rundle Lane and along Braeburn Street, as seen in the brighter orange. And there are a few row house dwellings that were lost due to the extension of Braeburn Street to the west for future development lands at the request of township staff. The higher density blocks to the north and south remain with a slightly different layout due to the park and the removal of Street C. The detailed layout for these blocks will be determined through site plan and final plan of subdivision as before, and will still support higher density residential development. Next slide, please. As mentioned, the proposed zoning bylaw amendment seeks to simplify the zoning on the site, establishing one lower density site-specific R2 zone to permit a mix of ground-oriented housing, including singles, semis, and row houses. Additional dwelling units will be permitted, subject to the general provisions of the zoning bylaw. A higher density site-specific R4 zone is also proposed, which permits row houses and back-to-back row houses. The zoning bylaw amendment would also relocate the open space zone to reflect the new size and location of the park. Again, I will note that the open space and EP zones associated with stormwater management and the unidentified wetland to the south, as well as the site-specific LC3 zone to the north, are not proposed to change as a result of this application. Next slide, please. In summary, this application seeks to permit a greater mix of residential uses than was previously contemplated due to changing housing market and changing residential needs of the town of Brighton. The proposed amendments represent red line revisions to the existing draft plan of subdivision and a greater simplification of the zoning on the site to allow for greater longevity and sustainability within the community. The proposed development does continue to meet and exceed the minimum density targets established by the town of Brighton as well as Northumberland County. It is our professional planning opinion that the proposed zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of subdivision amendment are consistent with the provincial planning statement, conform with the Northumberland County and Town of Brighton official plans, and comply with the intent of the zoning bylaw. I am now happy to take any questions from council or if there are any outstanding questions from the public.
Thank you, Ms. Newitt. Questions from council? Go ahead, Councilor Rowley.
Thank you, Mayor. Just looking, this is the most westerly part of this development?
Correct.
Okay. May I ask, to the west of this development is farmland. Is there a minimum distance setback regarding what goes on the farm, the agricultural property there?
Sorry, are you directing that question to me or to staff?
Mr. Warren?
Through the chair, I'm not sure the Cheer Farm, you mean?
Yeah.
That's to the west, yeah. If there was any need for like looking at the MDS calculations, that would have been completed when these lands were draft approved 3 years ago.
If I may clarify, the town of Brighton zoning bylaw does not currently include a setback between agricultural and residential uses. It is predominantly regulated through the MDS, which is a provincial calculation that seeks to ensure sufficient setbacks for noise, odor, and disruption from agricultural uses, though properties within the urban boundary are exempt from that setback calculation.
Dr. Walsh?
Through the Mayor to Council, the Cheer Farm, the lands immediately abutting to the west, are also designated as urban. And the agriculture is permitted to continue. And there is a condition in the draft set of conditions dealing with agricultural impacts. I believe it was specifically dealing with the use of pesticides and notice to the owners of the properties in the subdivision, be given some notice regarding those activities. There may be prudent to take another look at that wording in the conditions if the operations of the farmer have changed. And we haven't, to my knowledge, heard from that farmer. Not to say that we won't, but I think that we did address that same issue in the previous draft approval.
Okay, and I guess maybe that's more what my question was, as far as not so much how the farm will impact your neighborhood, but how the neighborhood will impact the operations of the farm.
So the proposed development is not anticipated to impact the operations of the farm.
Councillor Butwell.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Would you mind going back to the slide with all the oranges and yellows? That one. So in looking at that, in the original plan, draft plan, can you indicate to me where the stacked back-to-back row houses were? Because I don't see any red anywhere.
Yes, through the chair, the screen distorts the color in an unfortunate way, but the blocks to the far north and the far south, which are the densest color of orange red,
Yes.
are where the stacks were originally considered. And similarly, back-to-back row houses and standard row houses could be considered in those blocks in the new proposed plan. So in the north and the south, they've been realigned to remove street C and obviously accommodate the park moving.
So just to follow up, so you've blended the back-to-back and the stacked back-to-back into one color category?
Correct. Through the chair, that is correct on the plan, as they are kind of the most highest density contemplated within these lands. Obviously, to the north, apartment buildings are still permitted in the LC3 zone. So being kind of the highest density considered within the property, it's a combined color.
Okay.
It's predominantly because these blocks are also open at this time. There's no lotting proposed. So in future, that built form will be designed and determined in a more detailed way during future applications.
Okay, and if I might continue with follow-up, I believe it was a preceding screen, but I don't need to see it. There were originally in the original draft plan, there were 198 back-to-back stacked units, and now there's 0. So we're losing the highest density component in favor of a lower density.
So through the chair, there are currently no stacked back-to-back townhouses considered. But as I said, those blocks remain open for programming. So the conceptual land use plan that was originally prepared provided the unit count. They help us to determine compliance with the zoning bylaw, as well as capacity for water, sewer servicing, and things of that nature. The conceptual land use plan designed for this application does not include stacked back-to-back townhouses. To be very frank, the developer has had a hard time marketing them. However, if the market in Brighton changes and is seeking that denser form of development, it can be considered in these blocks.
So the does that mean what we are looking for in the what's being asked? Are they all single-story units? Are they all bungalows or raised bungalows?
So through the chair, all of the bright yellow on the plan to the right are singles. The developer has a mixed product, so 1 or 2 story, depending on the homeowner. The darker yellow on the plan to the right are semi-detached. Those were not considered originally on the plan to the left. The mid-orange, which is hard to distinguish from the red, are the traditional row houses. So again, they vary in height between 1 and 2 stories, depending on the form that the homeowner selects, are within those orange blocks. And then those are all of the blocks that are lotted out. And then there are the mid-density zones to the north and south that are not currently designed in detail.
No, I totally get that. But when you just mentioned, should the buyer be interested in a 2-story, are none of them planned as 2 stories? Or is it?
It's up to the buyer. There is the opportunity for 1 with basement and 2-story. The single story with basement that this developer offers is also what we refer to in planning as an ADU ready unit. So there are connections in the basements, and the homeowner has the option of opting in and having the developer install the unit at the time that the home is developed, or they can move forward with that once they hold the ownership of the home and do the construction internally. There are pros and cons to both. Obviously, the former is a much higher initial purchasing cost because there's added work at the construction side, whereas the latter, you have to have the motivation and the gumption yourself to deal with construction.
Yeah, and I get that I think because Brighton has been so accustomed with its new builds to having only bungalows, that the basement isn't a second story, it's a basement. So I'm looking for second stories when we talk about density versus just sticking two houses together and getting one extra house in over the same, like having a townhouse versus a semi-detached.
Yes, so these, I believe technically would be a 1.5 story so that there are sizable windows to allow for egress and, proper exits from the basement should they be converted into additional dwelling units.
I think over 50% has to be above grade for it to be considered a half story, but I don't.
They will be OBC compliant.
Yeah. So would they have a basement walkout or a walk up if the ADU is designed with the builder?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you both. Any other questions from council? Councilor Wright.
I think I'm just a little confused as to why we're losing 126 homes in total over this. I feel like we're going backwards rather than forwards in density. I know you said that the builder is having a hard time marketing the stacked back-to-back townhouses. Aren't we in a social situation where we've got loads of people looking for that kind of? I'm confused because it just seems like it's the opposite of everything I'm hearing everywhere else.
Of course, through the chair, those numbers are from the conceptual land use plan, so they are not set in stone. The first phase of this build out would be those singles and semis, those lower density, because they are what is selling in the market right now. We have stacked back-to-back options elsewhere, just in Coburg, just outside of Brighton, that are not moving. The market is very not very stagnant at the moment in housing in general. But the second phases, which would be those higher density, as I said, if the market changes and there are people who are interested in the stacked back-to-back form, that could be considered for those blocks. So the overall density provided in the conceptual land use plan was kind of the lowest consideration, so that we could still confirm that we were meeting and exceeding the minimum density targets within the Northumberland and the town of Brighton official plans. But there is the potential for greater density within the site once those blocks become detailed development happens.
Do you have a follow-up?
Didn't I just hear about a conversation with someone through the Air Force that they've got people looking for housing and likely more denser style housing? Yeah. So I kind of still think we could use them here in Brighton. Like I can see where Coburg might be a little bit outside that range.
And that conversation continues to be ongoing. Director Walsh?
Through the Mayor Council, there's been a meeting established for Wednesday. Most of the builders looking at a good response rate from the builders, developers to attend. Just on the matter of density, I think staff were kind of disappointed to see a proposal with 120 fewer homes, maybe it is. And I know the stacked townhouses are a hard sell, even in some of the robust markets. So it didn't come as a big surprise. And the developers experiencing some really low sales in other areas, other projects that they're working on. I wouldn't be surprised that perhaps after a phase or two here is constructed, that they might go back and revisit the stacked townhouses or other form of higher density as the market responds.
Thank you. Councilor Wheeldon?
Thank you, Mayor. Just for some more context about markets and density, currently and over the past year, we've seen twice as many new listings per month as there are sales, and that's just in existing homes. Province-wide, there's over 40,000 new homes that are sitting empty, ready for occupancy, but unsold. Because we're in this weird point where there's still huge pent-up demand for housing, but nobody can afford the houses that are here. I'm sure it's far too early to talk about price point for these units. Do you have a general ballpark of what the difference would be between cost of a back-to-back stack town and a single detached?
Through the chair, I do not have those numbers, but we can ask the developer and circle back.
Councilor Butwell.
Thank you through you, Mr. Mayor. I share the sentiments of my colleagues that are expressing some concern about lowering densities. I hear you when you say they're finding in other areas they're a bit of a harder sell. I don't like the idea of reducing the density and then hoping down the road that, they start to sell elsewhere and so we get them back. I don't want to be on the receiving end of perhaps not properly judging the market from elsewhere. Because we did receive a message that we're looking for higher densities in this area. And I see, I'm a realtor. So I do see movement in the price point that those townhouses are likely to be in, or those stacked houses are likely to be in. And to lose over 100 dwelling units that's a lot. That's a lot.
Thank you for that. Not sure I should ask this question, but I'm gonna. Is this developer one of the guests who will attend on the Wednesday at the Trenton Military Family Resource Center?
Yeah, I've mentioned it in conversation and we're on the broadcast email. The responses are going directly to the resource team in Trenton. So I can't confirm that exactly, but
Thank you.
I'm hopeful.
Appreciate that. And I will note for council's information that the motion is to receive the information just like the last one, and staff will bring back a report. So we're not being asked to make a fulsome decision. So I'm certain staff are hearing what council's having to say, and those concerns will be expressed to the developer, their proponent, and we'll see what comes of it, especially after Wednesday. Hopefully there's a good message that comes from our friends in the military. Yeah. Thank you. Mr. Warren, any final comments?
Nothing at this time. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. I have a motion moved by Councilor Wright, seconded by Councilor Rowley, that the report of the Planning and Development Department dated December 8th, 2025 regarding proposed amendment to Applewood Meadows draft plan of subdivision and zoning bylaw amendment applications be received. That additional information is requested from the proponent and how the supply of housing mix will contribute towards housing affordability. And then after receiving comments from the public, commenting agencies, peer reviewers, and municipal staff, that a staff report is brought back for council's consideration regarding the proposal. Is there any discussion? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. And that ends the statutory public meeting with a motion moved by Councilor Rowley, seconded by Councilor Wright, that council move out of the statutory public meeting December 8th, 2025 at 7:59 p.m. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. Would anyone like a break? Yeah, okay, it is 7:59. We will recess until 8:09. That's 10 minutes. Okay, friends, it is 8. Oh, I don't have enough counselors. I do actually. Okay, it is 8:09. It's 8:09. I'm gonna call this meeting back to order. And we're moving to planning and development reports. The next report is 179, part lot control exemption application, PLC 02/2025 Brighton Meadows. Manager Warren, we've read this report. Do you have anything to add or highlight?
Through the chair, nothing at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a motion moved by Councillor McCausland, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that council receives the staff report regarding an application for part lot control exemption as submitted by McDonald's Homes pertaining to Block 56, Plan 39M960. That council proceed to enact a bylaw to exempt from part lot control certain lands specifically described as Block 56, Plan 39M960. The council instruct the municipal solicitor to register the part lot control bylaw as enacted and to prepare a transfer easement from the owner to the municipality regarding parts 2 through 6 and parts 1, 7, 8, and 9 as individual residential lots as shown on reference plan 39R blank. I'm assuming the solicitor will fill that blank in prior to registration of the part lot control bylaw, and that council resolved to receive and support the draft reference plan 39R blank for lands as being exempt from part lot control as illustrated and otherwise attached to this report. Is there any discussion? And before I open the floor, Manager Warren, I will just get you to confirm that the blank will be completed by the solicitor when it's registered.
Yes, if not before, thank you.
Thank you.
Chair.
Questions from members of council? All in favor? Are there any opposed? That motion's carried. That brings us to report 2025-171 Clean Yards Bylaw. Bylaw Enforcement Officer Shepherd, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight?
At this time, thank you.
There's a lot of work to get there, but thank you. It's moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor Butwell, that council receives a staff report number PD 2025-171 regarding adding naturalized area provisions into the Clean Yards Bylaw, and that council repeal the current Clean Yards Bylaw number 029-2012 and approve the proposed replacement bylaw to add naturalized area provisions, add and update relevant definitions, and add administrative monetary penalty provisions. Is there any discussion? Go ahead, Councillor Wheeldon.
I just want to say I really appreciate this report and this approach to naturalizing spaces in the community. It's something that has been a slow project at our house for the last number of years. A little less grass every year and a few more pollinator-friendly plants. But it's also there's been a long-standing legal precedent that people who have been trying to take these steps have been ultimately backed by the courts against bylaws. So I'm glad that we are getting out of the way of progress in this regard as well. And I also just want to commend staff for being really responsive to this issue when you saw the opportunity to update this bylaw. It's very appreciated and well received.
Thank you. Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Mayor. Although I appreciate the comments of my colleague across from me, I certainly hope that this doesn't turn into an excuse for some people just not cutting their grass. As far as I've seen, kind of the non-benefits of that as well, when you see vermin and things in your own backyard because your neighbor can't clean up his stuff. So I get it. I have, once again, faith in our staff as far as our bylaw staff to kind of assess these kind of situations, but I just hope it doesn't become an excuse for some.
Yeah, I appreciate both comments, and I think there is a balance here, and I think we've stricken that balance. I think I'm saying that right. We have striked that balance. We have struck that balance. The balance is written within the bylaw. And I'm hopeful that staff will use good common sense as they apply enforcement techniques across the municipality. Councillor Wheeldon.
Thank you, Mayor. Just for the sake of the public who haven't seen it, naturalized area is very thoroughly defined, and it starts by saying a monitored and maintained area of vegetation purposefully cultivated to support native or non-invasive natural vegetation, habitats, or ecological functions, and may include wildflowers, native grasses, shrubs, pollinator gardens, meadow areas, or other intentionally maintained natural landscapes. So that I think the wording is there to make sure that that this bylaw is not an excuse for just letting things go. And I appreciate how careful staff were to maintain that balance. But your point is well taken. I've seen that as well, and occasionally I've done that. I'm sure we all have, but no, I think we've got it covered here.
This is not confessional, Councillor Wheeldon. Councillor Wright.
I was just wondering if bylaw staff was having any training in terms of recognizing noxious weeds versus pollinators and the vegetation that we want to see in those spaces.
Bylaw enforcement officer.
Through you, Mayor. I don't think Alan or I specifically have any training to do with noxious weeds. I will say that the Ontario government does a really good job with their laying out those noxious weeds. They provide a lot of photos for references. They provide different ways that you can test those plants. So I would say out of the gate, no, neither of us really have any training in that. I would say that as with any other bylaw, there is some background investigation to be done to figure out, what we are necessarily looking for, how we can conduct those tests and come to those conclusions. We also have a lot of people in our community who are able to support us in that way, who have that knowledge that we're able to reach out to, and if we need it. This complaint specifically, this came from a bylaw complaint where the person who was being complained about actually is a specialist in plants. So he actually gave us some direction when kind of creating this bylaw and some steps that we can take. And we're very lucky to have some neighboring municipalities as well, most notably Prince Edward County, who is really, really into their naturalization program over there. And they have a lot of staff that are very well versed in that. So we also have those partners as well that we can reach out to if we do need that help.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Just a quick follow-up question in terms of all those links to the Ontario websites that show these particular plants. I'm just looking at the one in particular, hogweed. If we could have those links included on our site to make it easy for public to like if they think that there's something wrong, they can click on that and go and take a look, because what you don't want to have happen is people going and touching giant hogweed. That one is particularly scary.
Very blistery. Any other comments or questions? Go ahead, Councillor Rowley.
Thank you. I'm thinking of one property in particular in the municipality. I'm not going to give any names. It's a significant size property. It is not a residential property, but I think of the long grass and down trees, and I think of the hazards that causes during the summertime. Will we be able to, what's the word I'm looking for? We'll be able to have our bylaw people look at that?
I'm trying to think of what property you're on about. Anyway, I suspect that if it does not comply with the current property standards bylaw, we would be willing, our staff would be willing to look at it. Bylaw enforcement officer Shepherd.
Through you, Mayor, I just wanted to add as well, one of the things I chose when I was working on this report to repeal the existing Clean Yards bylaw and issue a new one. For one reason being, I really wanted that detailed definition for the naturalized area. Some municipalities just have a one-liner in their bylaw, and I really, really wanted to avoid that because that's very much open to interpretation and can cause issues. But another one that's more related to your comment is I noticed when I started here a year ago that we were missing that number in our grass height. So originally our bylaw did note that it just had to fit in with the surrounding environment. That's really difficult in terms of enforcement. That's very difficult to defend that in a court or in front of a hearings officer. So one of the things I did do in this new reiteration of the bylaw was add that 20-centimeter height in, which is consistent with the other municipalities. So that's a lot easier to enforce for Alan and I.
Thank you. Councillor Wright.
In terms of that height, I think it's 20 inches that is mentioned, and that is along
Centimeters.
20 centimeters. Gosh, I could think of more than a dozen plants right off the top of my head that are taller than 20 centimeters.
I think that's just for grass.
Just for grass.
Yeah.
Okay, even some grasses that are taller than 20 centimeters. So that 20 centimeters applies to plants along property edges and along boulevards for sight lines. But if it's on, like in the center of a property, you can go above that 20 centimeters.
I think as long as it's a designated, like you've designated your naturalized area, I think you'd be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the staff will use good common sense and have those conversations with property owners. It's always education first and enforcement second. Officer Shepherd.
Through you, Mayor, we've also added in this bylaw, it was really important when Paul and I talked about it originally, something we really wanted to have in here that we saw in other bylaws that we liked was that buffer zone. So we did add a 1 meter distance around the boundary of the property where it has to be, it can't be a naturalized area. We do need that 1 meter space between adjoining properties that has to be kept in compliance with the rest of the terms in the Clean Yards bylaw. And that's so that you can't kind of let that spread to like your neighboring properties and fester complaints that way. So
thank you for that. Any other questions or comments? Did I read the motion? I think I did. Yeah. Okay. All those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. Brings us to report 2025-181 part lot control exemption application PLC 03-2025 Applewood Meadows. Manager Warren, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight?
Through your worship, nothing at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a motion moved by Councillor Butwell, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon. The council receives a staff report regarding an application for part lot control exemption as submitted by 8597685 Canada Inc. pertaining to Block 18, Plan 39M 961. The council proceed to enact a bylaw to remove part lot control from certain lands, specifically described as Block 18, Plan 39M 961. The council instruct the municipal solicitor to register the part lot control bylaw as enacted and to prepare a transfer easement from the owner to the municipality regarding parts 2, 3, 5, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13, and 15 through 18, and parts 1, 4, 7, 9, 11, and 14 as individual residential lots as shown on reference plan 39R 14908 prior to registration of the part lot control bylaw. And the council resolves to receive and approve the reference plan 39R 14908 for lands as being exempt from part lot control as illustrated and otherwise attached to this report. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. Brings us to report 2025-176 secondary plan public open house. Mr. Barnes, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight?
Through you, worship. No, I do not.
Thank you, sir. I have a motion moved by Councillor Rowley. And sir, I can't see you through the jungle up here. It's great. Which is wonderful. It's a beautiful jungle. Very Christmassy. I have a motion moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson, that council receives a secondary plan public open house report as information. Is there any discussion? I would just note that I have received some comments around concerns around EP and et cetera, and I think you've seen those as well. I saw them in your list of things. And I wonder if you would mind making comment for the public and maybe council about what the secondary planning pictures are, what the diagrams are, and what they mean from a planning perspective. And then, of course, official planning and zoning, et cetera, will still need to happen if any changes are to be made, are to happen.
Sure. Thank you, Your Worship, through you. As part of the process, we did a number of researches, looked at photographs, aerial photographs, old mapping, new mapping, site inspections, and the secondary plan areas, the 3 secondary plan areas are, as we know, designated greenfield or for long-term urban development. As we move along this process, as you've had the opportunity to comment and talk to people, as we have through the open house and through the various agencies' comments, to try and refine the land use schedules, the pictures you're talking about. There are some refinements that need to be made based on input that we did receive from the open house and the Conservation Authority. And those revisions will take place over the next month and a half to finalize the secondary plan, and it'll come back to a statutory public meeting in, I'm guessing, February, March. And hopefully we'll have all those issues ironed out at that time.
Thank you, Mr. Barnes. The other comment I heard was around the growth numbers, and I think we're all often suspect about the numbers that are provided to us through the county by the province. Those numbers tend to be, in my experience, less than the actual numbers that we see come to the community. I wonder if you have any comment around that.
Sure. Just some background on that. When the secondary plan was first started a number of years ago, there was a consultant hired called Macroeconomics that was responsible for that portion of the secondary plan. They had projected population growth of 5,700 people to the year 2051. The county had a projection of 4,800 to same year 2051. Since Ms. Whiteman and I took over the plan, we did our own calculations, our own projections, and basically we split it down the middle. So over the 25-year period, the county number is 4,800. What we have in the secondary plan is 5,200. Over 25 years, that's 400 people. You know, it's crystal balling. You know, we're comfortable with it, but if it becomes an issue, we have been in discussions with the county planners on that.
Thank you. Appreciate that information. Go ahead, Councillor Wright.
I had some of the same, I think the same person actually expressing concern to me. And just wondering if the planning department could comment on conceptual plans versus, and I don't even want to say that the official plan is like set in stone, because realistically, any property that has a zoning can potentially, through a study, be changed. Am I incorrect in that?
Mr. Burns? Your microphone, please.
Yeah, as time goes on, I'll say the planning of the properties within the secondary plan will have to be refined based on a number of studies. You saw 214 Ontario tonight. There was a list of 10 studies done for that property to determine what the land use was going to be, how it was going to be serviced and all that. Those studies will follow the secondary plan to refine the exact land use, the locations of the roads, the EPs, the parks, all of that will come. This is a high level document. This
Right.
one is, and it'll get more refined as the studies come in over the years.
Sorry, can follow. So it's kind of a living, breathing document that can be changed through the course of studies.
Correct, yeah. Now this will be an amendment. The secondary plan will be an amendment and form part of the official plan
Okay.
when at the end of the day, when we're done with this, so. And
Okay,
then, yes, it can be changed as the studies come in
right.
and a number of the developers and landowners that we've spoken to through the open house and other correspondence, that's exactly how we've explained it to them, that it's conceptual to the point where when you when you bring your development proposal forward, you'll do all these studies to further refine what it is. But the broad brushstrokes of the thing are there. So the residential areas, the yellow areas on those pictures will be residential. The red areas on those pictures will be mixed use, residential, commercial, green, environmental or open space. So, but the exact configuration of those lots will be determined through the next stages of planning.
Okay, so in this particular case, I think he was concerned that the maps on the official plan don't look like they're matching what's coming out on the secondary plan.
Yeah, we've spoken with him and we're ironing out that.
Or I'm still ironing out too. So I just wanted to kind of highlight the point that through growth and through development, when you purchase a property, if the property across from you is zoned environmental, if there's studies that come down the pipe, that environmental status can change, and you could very well end up with neighbors that you didn't plan on, that you didn't know about. Right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Thank you for that. And just to note, we are receiving this as information tonight. We're not making any decisions. Those decisions will come at a later date. Anything further from members of council? All in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. Next report is 2025-173, Automated Speed Enforcement Program Summary and Budget Considerations. Director Walsh, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight?
Through the mayor, the council, nothing further.
I have a motion moved by Council Rowley, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson, that council receives the staff report regarding the Municipality of Brighton's automatic speed enforcement program summary and budget considerations, and that net revenues from the ASE program in the amount of $1,444,364.75 be addressed in the 2026 budget as follows. $750,000 being allocated to offsetting the general levy for the budget years of 2026 through 2030 inclusively. $140,000 being allocated to a streetscape design, including trees and landscaping for Ontario Street, Elizabeth Street, and Main Street in preparation for the multi-use pathways and sidewalks along with various street lighting improvements. The remaining amount of $554,364.75 be transferred into a capital reserve account for completing a streetscape design for Elizabeth Street and Main Street as presented in the draft 2026 capital budget. In keeping with the design referenced in CI above, construction of a multi-use pathway along the south side of Elizabeth Street from Pinnacle Street to John Street, and general construction of public health and safety projects, including sidewalks, street lighting, additional MUPs, and community-wide trails, and that staff continue monitoring traffic safety issues through use of Black Cat data collection. Is there any discussion? Councillor Wright.
I'm not sure I completely misheard, but I think you read the 120,000 being allocated as 140, and then the remaining amount of 574 as 554. Do I have a different copy? Oh, interesting.
It's true. So the report numbers aren't marrying up to the motion numbers. So we probably should get those right before we pass a motion. Go ahead, CAO.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to council, we did have some discussions back and forth about that number specifically, and I agree what is in my paper copy is not what I see online. So that number should be 140,000. That was allocated for the streetscape design, and that was identified in the budget presentation that council received. Therefore, reducing that 500 and change by the 20,000.
So the numbers I'm reading in the motion are correct? Thank you. Councillor Butwell.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I suppose to you or to staff, I am still catching back up to speed after being away for a period of time. The $750,000 that's being allocated to offset the general levy, can somebody explain where that number came from and why 750 was the number? Because it was my understanding when we approved going for the automated speed enforcement, that any revenues that were brought in would be applied towards community safety measures. And I don't remember a conversation about it, but I may have missed it.
So part of the offsetting of the general levy is to provide funds for public safety, community safety, road safety, pedestrian safety that would normally be attached to the levy. So instead of taxing people for those monies, we're using those monies out of automated speed enforcement and then flowing them through the next 5 or 6 years, no, 4 years. On a lesser amount. So the large amount is this year, about $500,000, as I recall. No? Yeah, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The $250,000 initially that was allocated in the 2025 budget was allocated to the operating budget. So when we looked at subsequent years to remove that 250, which we had to do because of the loss of automated speed enforcement, it instantly would be a 2% impact to the tax rate. So we took half of the revenue, and to minimize the impact, we will use that against the operating revenue. Again, it can be allocated then to those safety measures as well, but it will offset the impact. So this year we will use 250 again. Next year will be 200, 150, 100, and down to 50,000. And then the balance is identified in this report specifically for the streetscape design and then the other initiatives.
Thank you. And to this year, I think we've talked about this briefly a couple of weeks ago when we were just talking about this in general. Just yourself and we were talking. I'm still not 100% clear. So perhaps it's because it's late and I've had too much caffeine. At the end of the day, this 1.444364.75, all of it is either going to be applied towards this 250 or this decline. All of this money is being allocated towards safety measures in as many years as it takes to use it up. Is that what I'm understanding? Or are we just trying to get are we just trying to lower taxes in general?
Both. The answer is yes.
Okay.
So the value is being put toward those infrastructure operational safety measures that we would have had to go to the taxpayer to do.
But then some of it's just going to keep the taxes lower.
But it's both.
But it's
because we have to do those things because that's what we do operationally. And so we've got this additional revenue that we had budgeted in 2025 to use. So we're going to continue budgeting it in 2026 for that purpose, and then slowly lower the amount out of ASEs
over the course of the next.
knowing that it's got to go away.
Okay.
Councillor Wheeldon.
So to be clear then, we are not necessarily using these excess resources as excess resources. We're using them to offset what we would otherwise be spending. So we're not going to be accelerating the implementation of these safety measures with this influx of resources. We're just going to be covering it as we go.
Yes, although we have budgeted to increase the level of safety measures based on funding from the province. Promised funding from the province. Anything further from members of council? All those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion is carried. Spoke too long. Everyone, I got locked out. Next report is 2025-178, new animal control bylaw. Officer Shepherd, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight?
Not at this time.
Thank you. I have a motion moved by Councillor Wright, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that council receives the staff report number PD 2025-178 regarding the passing of a new animal control bylaw to regulate cats and dogs within the municipality of Brighton. And that council passes the proposed animal control bylaw as shown on this agenda, and that council directs staff to monitor the effectiveness of the cat control program for the 2026 year. Is there any discussion? Councillor Wright.
I would actually like to refer this back to staff for the following reason. I'm finding the bylaw just a bit light on the cat side of things. There's some nuances that are missing in terms of feral cats. There's nothing in the report that talks about feral cats and to protect them and the people who are caring for them, and to facilitate I know we're not right now supporting the trap neuter release programs, but there are people who are in place right now that are facilitating that on our behalf and largely out of their own pockets. And those cats have very different behaviors to the pet cats that are by and large a huge issue as well in the municipality. So I would really like to see some additions to the bylaw in terms of feral cats specifically.
So you're asking that we put a motion to refer back to staff for further consideration on the control of feral cats?
Yes, please.
Does that sound about right?
Yep.
Is there a seconder before I make all those words on paper? Thank you. There's no discussion permitted on a referral, I don't think. No. All those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. We have no items for information purposes, which brings us to unfinished business, the summary of the 2025 building permits. This is just for information. Any questions from members of council? Motion is moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor McCausland, that council receive the 2025 building permit summary as information. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. Well, thank you for the summary, and I appreciate getting the monthly updates as well by email. I think those are very informative. Sometimes a little concerning when it's all decks and pools in the summer. Moves us to bylaws. First bylaw is with regard to part lot control, Applewood Meadows. It's moved by Councillor McCausland, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that council gives a bylaw for second and third reading and finally passes on this date. Being a bylaw under the provisions of Section 50, Sub 5 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, Chapter P13, as amended, designating certain land situated in the municipality of Brighton, specifically described as Block 18, Plan 39, M961, not subject to part lot control. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. The next bylaw is part lot control Brighton Meadows, moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson, that council gives a bylaw its first, second, and third reading. And finally passes on this date, being a bylaw under the provisions of section 50 sub 5 of the Planning Act RSO 1990. Chapter P13 as amended, designating certain lands situated in the municipality of Brighton, specifically described as Block 56, Plan 39M-960, not subject to part lot control. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. Next bylaw is a zoning bylaw for 1208 Richmond. It's moved by Councillor Wright, seconded by Councillor Rowley, that council gives a bylaw its first, second, and third reading and finally passes on this date. Being a bylaw under the provisions of Section 34 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, to amend bylaw number 140, 2002 as otherwise amended of the Corporation of the Municipality of Brighton as it applies to the lands located at 1208 Richmond Street, legally described as part of Lot 9, Concession 6, Geographic Township of Crammy, Municipality of Brighton. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. Next is the Clean Yards bylaw. It's moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor Butwell. The council gives a bylaw its first, second, and third reading and finally passes on this date. Being a bylaw to regulate the maintenance of yards, properties, and to support environmental stewardship, public safety, and community standards. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. The animal control bylaw was referred to staff. Brings us to question period. Is there anyone in the gallery that has a question with anything on tonight's agenda? Mr. Green. You know the rules about being nice.
I do. Mayor and Council, in regards to 7.5, the automated speed enforcement, I won't even get into that discussion. The three products that were left over, the copier, I assume we can make use of, but the folder stuffer and the additional postage machine, what is our intention with those two relatively expensive products?
Dr. Walsh.
To the delegate, we have been having some internal discussions to see what we might do with those. They are newer equipment. They might be useful for the taxation office, for example, who might have some older equipment, but they're in essence paid for through the program. So those numbers that you saw reflect, as best I recall, the net of that capital investment. So our intention thus far is to retain that, but we haven't really approached the suppliers to what the take back provisions might be, how much penalty there might be. But those have been discussions to date.
Thank you.
I guess it's not feasible to get a truck and take them to Mr. Ford. Thank you.
To answer your second question, I don't think it would be polite, regardless of how we may feel. We have no closed session this evening, which brings us to a confirmatory bylaw. It's moved by Councillor McCausland, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that council gives a bylaw its first, second, and third reading, and finally pass on this date, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Corporation of the Municipality of Brighton planning meeting held on December 8th, 2025. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. And a motion moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson, that the December 8th, 2025 council planning meeting adjourn at 8:48 p.m. Is there any discussion? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. Thank you everyone very much. May God save the King.